Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. We're joined again by Dan Will, Marketing and Insights Director at MRI Springboard, for our monthly Footfall update. Hi, Diane.
Good morning, Simon.
Just to remind the listeners, I think February Footfall was up month on month. March, we took a bit of a downturn and we were down month on month. So what did it look like in April with, my recollections are clearly Easter, bit of sunshine. I have a recollection of more rain than sunshine, but where did we end up in April?
Yes, April was actually a bit of a bounce back. Footfall went up by 7.2% from March, which is good, helped by the strong week in Easter, which was the first week of the month. So that was really good. In that week alone, footfall was 14.2% higher than the week before, 17% higher in high streets, because obviously people tend to gravitate into town centres to enjoy some of the Easter events that they put on. So yeah, it was a reasonable month in April, actually, not bad at all. So yeah, you're right about March. March was a bit of a washout. Having everyone said that February was the driest February, then March seemed to be the wettest March, and April actually had a bit of a bounce back in terms of weather, which really supported Easter. So yeah, not too bad. The annual change, so that's the change from 2020 to 2022, was 4.7% up. So it's okay. I mean, in February it was 11% up. So, you compare the 2 months, March was just 0.7% up. So, we're seeing a bit of an uplift from last year, but it's not huge. And we're still sitting 12% lower than we were in 2019 in April. So we've still got this gap from pre-pandemic levels that doesn't appear to be closing anytime soon.
And you said that the majority of that swing was in high street, so that would be people getting out, visiting, holidays over Easter. Was there any trend in retail parks?
Retail parks did see a little bit of an uplift. They did see an uplift over the Easter week, but the following week they saw quite a swing down, as did high streets, to be honest. And the rest of the month was pretty flat in retail parks. So, retail parks do get a bit of a boost over Easter because people use the weekend for gardening and home improvements at the start of the spring. So they all saw a bit of a boost that Easter week. But of course, tend to pay for it toward the end of the month, really, when it all goes a bit flat, particularly as we were anticipating a month of bank holidays in May. And I think a lot of people were holding back a little bit because they know that we have 3 bank holidays in May. We've got 1 to come still. So, I think, the spend only goes so far. So some of them people would have perhaps used maybe Easter for visiting family and friends rather than doing the shopping that they would traditionally do over Easter.
And regional shopping centres, they tend to be busier, don't they, when the weather's not great?
Yes, I mean, it's interesting with shopping centres over bank holidays. Easter particularly, they don't tend to do as well as high streets. There isn't such an event going on in shopping centres as there is in high streets. And a lot of Easter stuff is about eating out. And of course, that all happens much more in high streets than it would in shopping centres. So they did okay. Monthly change, they're up 4.6%. High streets are up 9.5%, so nearly double in high streets than in shopping centres. And retail parks somewhere in the middle at 5.1%. So not too bad a month. I mean, nothing to get overly excited about. And I think people are starting to now feel the pinch, of course, of higher interest rates, higher inflation, food prices. As we know, inflation on food is huge. So, household budgets are taking a hit. And of course, that means that people can afford less or fewer trips out.
Yeah. And as we record today, there's kind of rumours that interest rates are going to rise yet again, which will just add more pressure. So you mentioned there, clearly we're recording middle of March. So we're in bank holiday season and we're a bit lost, really. Every week seems to be a 4-day week, and I'm a day behind or a day ahead. So any information on the Coronation, did that have a positive impact, or did we just all sit and watch telly? The weather was pretty atrocious.
It was. It was quite interesting because, of course, I had to put a forecast together for the Coronation, which is something that, of course, never had to do before. And also it was following the May Day, the early May bank holiday. So that complicated matters as well. On the Coronation Day itself, footfall was through the floor, as you would imagine, because people were watching the Coronation, surprisingly. So on the Saturday, footfall was 20.6% below the week before, the previous Saturday, which of course was Bank Holiday Saturday the week before, when it had gone up by 9.3% from the week before that. So, it was below, it had fallen below the Bank Holiday level. Year on year, we were 13% down and 21% below 2019 levels. So it had a massive hit on that day. Interestingly, actually, we started to get a little bit more granular on Coronation Day because, of course, London, it was a special case and had a special impact. So central London, over the 24 hours, footfall was 9% below the previous week, compared to 20.6% across the UK. So, it did benefit from the coronation. But actually, during the hours of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., when, of course, the coronation was on, it didn't decrease at all. It was 0.2% below the previous week. So clearly there was a lot of activity during those, that 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. slot when people wanted to be in central London to see the events. And in somewhere like Knightsbridge, which we highlighted in our releases over the weekend because it's a bit iconic in terms of a British brand, but far enough away for people to be able to move around. Between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., that was 57.7% up on the previous week. So wow. People clearly, So it really helped parts of central London because people wanted to be in London to soak up that atmosphere, but they wanted to be able to go somewhere and actually move around. So that really helped that area of London. And in some areas around the UK, there were screens in town centres. This place like Hull had a screen and they were 3.9% up. Plymouth had a screen, they were 7.8% up. So there were some good things coming out of the coronation on that day, getting people into town centres. But then on the Sunday, high streets again did quite well because of all the street parties and all that sort of stuff. But shopping centres sort of fell away. So overall, in terms of the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, it was a bit of a neutral impact. It was very high in early May because the weather over the early May bank holiday was good, but then it decreased during bank holiday. So I think the benefits for retail of the coronation are a bit more long term. It's a bit more an investment into UK PLC really in terms of attracting overseas tourists into the UK and regenerating that interest in the monarchy and all things UK.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, amazing PR for that event. And in terms of just casting your mind forward for the rest of the month, clearly got another bank holiday at the end of the month. So what are your thoughts? Where do you see it heading for the rest of May?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for the rest of May because, of course, the last bank holiday in the month coincides with school half term, which traditionally is a sort of a bit of a peak time, but people may be heading off on holidays, of course, because kids are out of school. So, and the weather will come into play a little bit more because people have spent some cash earlier on and we've had good weather during the month. So I'm not anticipating a sort of a hugely fantastic late May bank holiday because one will balance the other out. Some people will stay home and go out and some people will go away. Some money's already been spent. And also with the interest rate rises looming, and also the fact that a lot of people are now looking forward towards summer and summer holidays. And for some people, of course, it's the first time that they'll have had to buy a summer holiday for a few years because a lot of people last year would have used pre-booked holiday money from pre-pandemic. So they'd have booked a holiday pre-pandemic, not taken it last year. This year, that's what probably will be used. So they've got to actually pay for a holiday. So that's going to use some budget up. So I'm anticipating sort of a quieter late May bank holiday, and then as we move forward into the summer, it's going to be, I think it's going to be quite tough for retail as people start to squirrel away money for some holidays.
Yeah, and I suppose just thinking about my trips to retail in the last week or so, certainly in the supermarkets, there's lots of price competition going on. So some of the big four matching Aldi or doing their kind of lowest ever prices. So price is key in that area. Be interesting to see what happens in fashion because clearly the seasons haven't really followed the trend. We've had a very wet start to the year, not much nice weather. So that normally means there's a kind of overhang in the seasonal wear, which leads to sales. If we don't have a good summer, then you end up with all the summer wear being reduced. So Interesting times in the tech world. There seems, it's, I won't say a race to the bottom, but the margins must be so slim based on some of the deals on, consumer electrics that are out there now, tellies, that it must be tough, and probably is going to get tougher before it gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fashion is always very, very temperamental and very, very difficult. You've got so many variables that come into play. You need a variable weather to drive demand, but getting stock right is difficult, and pricing right is hugely complex. So, and food, of course, has got this huge inflation attached to it right now. So, as you say, there's this race to the bottom, offering opportunities for some retailers, some food retailers, obviously, but presenting issues for others. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer, actually. So one that we're going to be clearly tracking closely, because we always do, and trying to build in the impacts of the financial markets in there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, back to I suppose I spend more time in supermarkets than young fashion for a number of reasons. One, that I'm not young, and two, I eat more than aware. But even I've noticed recently, probably not so much the early part of the year, but certainly in the last month or so, even basic things like mozzarella. So make your own pizzas, put mozzarella on. The basic own brand one now is £2.50. But the supermarket's been quite clever, because they've introduced it's probably an own label, something dairy, whatever, as their budget range underneath that. So people are playing the game to a degree. So I think it's interesting where it'll go with branded, non-branded, all those bits. But yeah, even on things as everyday as that, you start to see that price really creep up. And just walking around, it's amazing how many other shoppers you hear say, "Oh, look at the price of that now," or "I never saw that." So people are really buying those offers, or trading down almost into unknown brands, or the new budget brands that those organisations have introduced.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people were becoming very aware of that. We're becoming very selective. We're very discretionary about our spend. And, it's forcing hospitality operators, food stores, to be very imaginative, to try and keep our custom. But ultimately, they need to make margin to survive. So something's going to have to give. But, I noticed it personally myself. I went to a supermarket on Bank Holiday Monday to buy a few bits and came out spending £45. I wasn't anticipating that. So it shows, that it's quite substantially impacting everyone. And of course, we've only got finite amounts in our household budget. So if we are spending more on food, then we will probably rail back on going out to eat and going into town centres to have a look around, to do that discretionary shop that perhaps we did. So yes, it's going to be really interesting. And of course, everyone, holidays are really important to people. And so they're going to be looking very carefully at, what they can afford for the summer.
Yeah. Tricky times. So in summary, February was slightly up month on month. March was slightly down month on month. Good news in April, because that was up. Jury's out kind of on May due to fairly flat Coronation, but then bank holidays travelling through and people preparing for summer, plus pending interest rate rises as well. So all to be discussed in the next episode, when we can finalise May and have a talk about June.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, Simon.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time again, and we'll speak next month.
Thanks.